What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. Gabrielle is rapidly organizing, as we're seeing on satellite. We have another area of interest tagged in the main development region, and we have more ensemble runs to talk to you about today, to talk about our Central American gyre and Western Atlantic threat, potentially putting Cuba, the Bahamas, and the Gulf Coast in the line of fire. So we have a lot to talk about and not really too much time to go ahead and discuss it. So we're going to go ahead and start and dive right into it right here. So starting off, ladies and gentlemen, we have Tropical Storm Gabrielle. Here's what the situation we have. It is still a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm. However, at this point, it's now a scary 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm with the conditions it has ahead of it, and I'll explain to you why in just a second. But here's what we have for you guys right now. Minimum central pressure of 1,004 millibars, moving northwest at 12 miles per hour. Tropical storm force winds extend outward only 150 miles from the center. So it's definitely consolidating quite a bit more as it kind of starts to build its inner core a little bit, and more convection starts to fire near the center of circulation. Going over and briefly looking at the discussion for you guys right here. Gabrielle's low-level center remains mostly exposed, now between a large area of deep convection in the eastern semicircle and growing cells on the southwestern quadrant. Those have mostly been filled in the last few hours. I'll show you on satellite. There has been little change in satellite estimates since Scatometer missed this morning, so the initial intensity will remain at 50 miles per hour. The moderate westerly shear currently affecting Gabrielle is forecast to gradually lessen below 10 knots by 24 to 36 hours. This should begin to mitigate the effects of the surrounding dry air and allow for gradual strengthening. The NHC intensity forecast has once again been raised to trend towards the latest IVCN and HCCA consensus aids, and Gabrielle is expected to become a hurricane by Sunday. By day 5, on the onset of significantly stronger shear and cooler waters, there will be some weakening. Significant uncertainty about when Gabrielle will become extratropical, as the forward speed may contribute significant to a higher peak or intensity and longer time over warmer waters. So that's what we have going for you guys right here. The NHC is expecting this to become a hurricane by Sunday, and then 110 miles per hour by Tuesday. However, based on the latest model guidance that we have seen, it is very possible, and dare I say it likely, that this will be a major hurricane by the start of next week, and I'll go ahead and talk more about why in just a second. But first, here is the cone for you guys right here. This is the cone that we have expected to mainly stay out to sea. This is going to be more of one of those storms that kind of produces a lot of accumulated cyclonic energy and potentially has one of those power types of situations where it produces a lot of power, but it really doesn't do that much except for Bermuda and the Azores Islands. But still, we're seeing that major increase in intensity, and we're seeing that major increase in strength by both the NHC and the hurricane models, as conditions are only getting better and better and better with the model guidance. So that is something that we're going to want to pay attention to as well. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and go back here and talk about our area of interest very briefly. Then we'll get to satellite imagery and a few other things. A tropical wave located several hundred miles south-southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands is producing disorganized shower and thunderstorm activity. Some slow development of this system is possible throughout the middle to later parts of the week. Next week, while it moves west-northwestward across the eastern and central tropical Atlantic. 20% chance of formation in the next 7 days. So this is going to be more of a long-term threat based on what I am seeing right here from the NHC. So we're definitely going to want to pay attention to that moving forward. But let's go ahead and dive right into satellite imagery. Here is your satellite imagery. We'll start with Gabrielle, then our other area of interest. So here's what we have going on with Gabrielle. We're actually going to go ahead and zoom in on this one very quickly just to show you this. Gabrielle has been organizing very quickly. It's been taking advantage of the lower shear values right here, and it's definitely consolidated a lot more near the center of circulation over the last few hours. You're definitely seeing more of this convection starting to fire off. Don't get me wrong, there is still probably about 20 or so knots of shear surrounding it, but that shear is expected to continue to decrease more and more as time continues to go on. And we're definitely going to, this is probably based on what I'm seeing with satellite imagery and in my opinion, the start of probably this building an inner core and the start of Gabrielle really starting to take off, especially I would say starting tonight and going into tomorrow. So that's what we're looking at right here. Definitely seeing a lot more of a consolidated system than we saw previously. And we'll go ahead and go back to about 120 frames just to show you that. So 120 frames, that's about 20 hours back. You definitely had some convection really blowing up yesterday on the northeastern side of it, but it mainly stayed outside of the center of circulation. But you did have some convection kind of popping up in the evening in parts of the southwestern side of it, and you did have some convection starting to flare up, but then some shear started to get into it and kind of start to expose the center a little bit more. But then as time went on, as we got into this morning, things really started to turn up, and you started seeing another convective burst starting to fire off over here, as well as multiple convective bursts on the southwestern side, kind of complementing that and allowing for it to really take over and allow for this for the convection to go kind of below the main source of convection, right? That's the convection. The center is now below this convection right here. There is still some shear impacting this, don't get me wrong, but it's a lot less than what we were noticing previously, and it's something that we're going to want to pay attention to, as this is now a much more consolidated storm, and we've been watching it since last night, because before there usually wasn't that much convection. Now there's a lot more of it, and what this is ultimately doing is it's speeding up the process to mix out a lot of the dry air issues that we had with this previously. And because before we had dry air over here, we had dry air up here, dry air below here, now those dry air issues are really starting to get mixed out because of this increased convection and the shear lessening quite a bit. So you're definitely going to want to pay attention to that. Also, the outflow looks a lot healthier now than it did previously, so that's another sign of quick organization as well. I would not be surprised if we see 60 miles per hour tonight at least with this organization right here, and that's something to keep in mind. Also, hurricane hunters are scheduled to go out in this system right here. If we can go ahead and show you aircraft reconnaissance, they are forecasted to start going out tomorrow into this system. They have it right here. Flight 1 will be around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Flight 2 will be on Sunday around 7 and around 8 in the morning. So that's what we're looking at with Gabrielle. NHC is taking this seriously. They're going to be putting recon missions in there. That will be critical for the amount of data and information we get with that. Now that we have the satellite imagery done, we're going to go ahead and briefly talk about the track models and intensity before getting to our area of interest. So let's go ahead and start with that. Here is your track models. Not really too much has changed. Pretty consistent over the next 3 days, mainly staying out to sea, maybe impacting the Azores Islands down the road over here. But by and large, this is a storm that doesn't really do that much except really produce a lot of power and a lot of ace for the season, so you're definitely going to want to watch out for that. The big stuff isn't coming until a little bit later, and we'll show you that in just a second. But here is your intensity guidance right here. Intensity guidance has really started to turn up over the last 24 hours. Before, we saw a massive spread. Then we started seeing the models starting to uptick a bit, and now the models are upticking more and more, and that cluster of models is now hanging, at least according to the 12Z, either at high-end Category 2 to mid-range Category 3, so that's a big upswing from what we've seen previously. And we've seen hurricane models as well, potentially going as high as a low-end Category 4, especially the Halves A. They've been really leading the charge with that as well. So that's also something that you're going to want to consider as well. So just a lot is really starting to go right for the system at the right time. And like I said before, this may seem like a 50-mile-per-hour storm, not do that much, but this is a scary 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm with A, the conditions it has ahead of it, B, the fact that it's already consolidated at its state that it is right now, and C, it still has a long way to go, and it still has plenty of warm water left to go with this. Just the conditions it has ahead of it is quite concerning for pretty quick intensification. So that's something you need to keep in mind. Also, we're going to go ahead and pop up towards the eastern Atlantic to talk a little bit about our area of interest over here. This area of interest is definitely going to be something to watch. It's not really that organized right now. The main focus will be on Gabrielle as well as the Central American Gyre once again, but I do want to pop over here briefly to talk about this. It's disorganized right now. I don't really expect that much development to start until probably the central Atlantic over here, the central main development region. I would not be surprised if it doesn't really do that much until then. Looking at water vapor imagery, okay, that's not the right one. Water vapor imagery, definitely going to be in a moist environment for sure. This environment is considerably more moist than what we saw previously, especially compared to Invest 91L. You're looking at a much more moist environment, and it's not going to be one of those things where, it stays there for 2 to 3 days and then moves into dry air. There's a big possibility that it's going to be in a moist air region for quite some time, even as it gets into the central or arguably the western main development region. That's definitely a possibility. And considering the NHC tags this just outside of the Lesser Antilles, you guys are definitely going to want to pay attention to the trajectory of this over the next few days or so. So that's something to pay attention to. Shear is not going to be a big issue right now. I'll have to look at the shear charts just to kind of see, okay, when are things going to start getting its act together? My main concern in terms of shear is the potential outflow from Tropical Storm Gabrielle, and if it gets too strong and the shear gets too expansive, will that tear the storm up, the tropical wave apart, and really inhibit development for that region? That's the main concern I have. Right now, it's more of a wait-and-see type of situation. Based on this, if you're in the Antilles, and same with the Cabo Verde Islands as well. We're going to want to wait and see what Gabrielle does. We're going to want to wait and see what this area of interest does in response to that, and how far north Gabrielle does before the system starts to get its act together. So we're going to have to pay attention to all those things here on the channel, and we'll continue to keep you updated on those as these threats emerge. Now we're going to go ahead and get more so towards the main meat of the video right here, because we have quite a bit to discuss for you guys right here. Ensemble models, especially in the Gulf region and in the Caribbean, are picking up on tropical development pretty quickly right here. Let's go ahead and show you that. Here is what we have 6 days out, starting off right here. Not really showing too much right here. I believe this would be either our area of interest right here, kind of taking its time organizing and developing right here, or another system. I'm not 100% sure which. With this right here, then going to 7 days out, you're starting to notice that's starting to kind of really start to turn up for parts of the Caribbean and in parts of the Greater Antilles right here. But then as we get to around the 27th of September, you're definitely noticing a few ensembles starting to pop up over here in parts of the Central American Gyre. And then especially going to the 28th, right here, you're definitely seeing more of those starting to flare up in those regions right here, 1,000, 1,002, 1,004, 1,001. Definitely a little bit of power associated with this as well. So you're definitely going to want to pay attention to that. And then as we get to 10 days out right here, definitely seeing quite a bit of a split. Some of the ensembles want this to head towards Cuba right here in Florida as a hurricane. Others want it to head towards the Yucatan Peninsula. Right now, what I will say is there is a lot of uncertainty in regards to this right now, but we do want to pay attention to the trends, because we've definitely seen more Central American gyre development possibilities on the ensembles, and even a couple operational runs pick it up from time to time than what we've seen previously. So that's something to pay attention to. Also, let's go ahead and show the GDM GNC data with this right here, just kind of giving you some context with this. Not showing as much tropical development right now, but this is mainly more so in the long term. But you're definitely starting to see some ensembles pop up over there. Actually, this is the 6Z. What's the 0Z showing? Okay, the 0Z data is definitely a lot more consistent with this. The reason I'm not showing the 6Z is because the 0Z and the 12Z use a lot more observational data, and the 6Z and the 18Z are more so the intermediate runs, and the 0 and 12Z are definitely ones you're going to want to trust the most, because it ingests more observations, ingests more conditions. They just plug generally a lot more data in it than the 6Z and 18Z, but the 0Z runs definitely do have something popping up over here. I'd say starting about 8 to 9 days out, so that's around the 28th of September, similar to what we saw with the previous ensemble runs right here. So if you're in Cuba, you're in Jamaica, you're in Central America, you're definitely going to want to pay attention to this a little bit more closely than you would previously with a long-term threat, because you're definitely seeing more of these ensembles pick it up than expected right here. And you're looking at potentially a power system with this as well. especially as it moves through Cuba and enters the Gulf region as well. As we get to 12 days out as well, you're definitely seeing a lot more power associated with these ensembles as well that you're going to want to pay attention to. Please do keep in mind this is a very long-term threat. By the time we get to late September, early October, that's when this scenario is supposed to play out. But because we've seen a consistent trend with this, and because we've seen more and more ensembles pick up on it than previously, this is something we want to keep in mind and something we want you to pay attention to as well. On top of our little development happening in parts of the main development region and Gabrielle, we have a lot to talk about, and kind of that's what we're looking at with you guys right here. So that's what we have with the ensemble runs right here. Just to kind of neatly wrap this up in a nice little bow, we're going to go ahead and show you some hurricane runs with Gabrielle, just to show you the potential intensity that this system could get up to. So here is what we have with the H-Wharf. We're going to show you both the radar imagery and the main sea level pressure winds. We'll start with the radar imagery first. So you have the system kind of taking its time to consolidate, but then the H-Wharf really starts to turn up its consolidation, I'd say by tomorrow morning, and then really starts to intensify very quickly as we get to Sunday, and then by Monday, you're already at a 970 millibar system, really blowing up in intensity. Gets down to below 960 by about, actually close to that, actually gets to 960 millibars by September 23rd right here as it starts to move out to sea. 957 millibar system associated with this right here definitely starts to weaken, in part maybe due to an eyewall replacement cycle, shear starting to chip at the structure, and cooler waters as well. Just a combination of the three is happening right here. But here is your main sea level pressure winds. Definitely starting to reach hurricane force winds. I'd say this is predicting, I'd say, a Saturday night right here. Could happen a little bit earlier than that, in my opinion, based on some of the data I've looked at. But you look at this right here. The H-Wharf is definitely nearing at Category 3 intensity by the time we get to 4 days out. So that would be, I believe, on Tuesday night or Tuesday morning by the time we get to that. So that's something to pay attention to and keep in mind. Looking at the HMON run as well, HMON's definitely consolidating this. They actually want this to be a hurricane by tomorrow morning, as a matter of fact, at the 12Z. And the HMON, despite it being quite aggressive, I definitely could see that as a scenario as long as the shear continues to decrease and as long as this continues to produce convection and start to consolidate more and more around it. But still, the HMON has the system really consolidating and intensifying more so. Gets up to major hurricane strength by Monday afternoon right here, and then starts to kind of consolidate, goes back and forth, and then as it heads out to sea, it does start to weaken a little bit and become a little bit more extra tropical. So that's your HMON run. Here is your halves A scenario right here. Halves A has the system consolidating actually pretty quickly. By the time we get to tomorrow morning, late tomorrow tonight actually, the halves A does have the system really starting to consolidate into a strong tropical storm nearing hurricane strength. By tomorrow afternoon, the halves A really wants this to start blowing up and consolidating major hurricane strength by Sunday afternoon as well. And then as we potentially a Category 4 storm, yeah, the halves A wants a 145 mile per hour Category 4 storm by about 3 days out. So that would be by Monday morning. Definitely would have the water temperatures to do it. The question is, A, will the structure hold? B, will it undergo an eyewall replacement cycle? And C, will the shear start to chip away at it? And I don't think it will until about 4 days out, which, by the way, the halves A is close to a 150 mile per hour Category 4, which, if that were the case, that would be very impressive with the conditions it has ahead of it. But then it starts to undergo eyewall replacement cycles and weaken and become more extra tropical. So that's your halves A run as well. And very quickly, we'll show you the halves B as well. Here is your halves B situation right here. You have the system consolidating, really starting to ramp up in intensity by Sunday, late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, and then it gets up to major hurricane strength, like Category 3, mid-range Cat 3 is the intensity. Then it starts to weaken and starts to kind of move out due to becoming more extra tropical, and starts to weaken due to wind shear and cooler water. So those are your situations that you're looking at right here. You're watching Gabrielle, watching our AOI in the MDR, you're watching our Caribbean setup as well. So those are all three things that we're going to continue to consider, and all three things we will continue to keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we're going to close the video out right here. In terms of the stream, I know I said we're going to do it tonight. Some things have come up. We're going to kind of be a little bit more flexible with it, so I'll let you know if the stream's canceled, delayed, or anything like that. But please stay tuned for announcements. I will let you know in the community tab. Also, be sure to, if you want to help out, hang out, or ask us questions, join the Storms United Discord server. Link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.